I'm Miwa Messer. I'm the producer and host of Poured Over, and Beth Macy is one of my favorite writers working today. And obviously, you know her from Factory Man, and you know her from Dopesick and True Vine and Raising Lazarus, and now we have Paper Girl. And I'm going to tell you right now, Beth and I had the same haircut. That haircut, the one on the book, we had this about 5 years apart, but we had the same haircut. 5 years, and I was outside of Boston, and you were in, now I have to say this properly. Say it for me.
Urbana, Ohio.
Urbana, because, okay, so when you come out of Boston, you do funny things with vowels, and I really did not want to do that. So, Urbana, Ohio. And I want you to walk, we're sitting on the Upper West Side of Manhattan right now, and I just want you to walk us through the Urbana that you grew up in.
So, just to use the cover as an illustration, that's our house on the right. My grandma lived on the left side, and she owned our house, which was largely why we weren't homeless some of the time. My dad was, no nice way to say this, he was, by the time I came along, the youngest by far of four, he was the town drunk and pretty deep into his alcoholism. And my mom kept the family together. She worked at the flagship factory in town called Grimes. They made the navigational lights that we still use today. And it was very much an old man Grimes town. He ran the town. He was mayor for a while. Like, he literally ran the town and, you know, gave scholarships to kids. And when I was coming up, there was a real vibe of education is important.
Yeah.
And so that was among many of the changes I witnessed as I decided to go back.
But also, in terms of the size of the town, right? How many people roughly when you were a kid?
About 11 to 12,000
Okay.
was the county seat. It's about an hour west of Columbus, an hour north of Dayton.
Okay, so landscape, rolling hills, flat. Not a lot. I don't think of a lot of forests.
Slightly rolling. We were the Urbana hill climbers. There's one tiny little hill that we marched down the hill at graduation and for the football games. And the first time I'm living in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and I take Tom, my husband, back home to see Urbana, and I go, "This is it. This is the hill. This is so important in my life." And like, you didn't even have to hit the gas to get up it. It was such a tiny hill, but we were the hill climbers, and we're proud of it.
So, not the smallest place, not the biggest place, just right. Yeah. I mean,
it was all I knew.
It's all you knew.
It was all I knew.
Multi-generational. I mean, I grew up in a town in the suburbs of Boston, though, where, like, people actually lived down the street from their grandparents, and I was like, what? I'm sorry, what? Like, people do this. Or, like, they live 2 towns over from their entire extended family, and I'm having a moment of, I have people in New Jersey. What is that landscape? What does the landscape of people look like?
Yeah. So, of course, it was all I knew at the time, but then moving away and living in bigger places. You know, my grandmother living next door was so key to my development. She taught me how to read and write when I was 4.
Right.
So I might have been the poorest kid in class, but I knew right away that I wasn't the dumbest.
Right.
You know, because I was kind of ahead of a lot of people. It was like my own private head start. And then I had these neighbors from Kentucky across the street who had moved to Ohio, like chasing factory work, and on the other side, and the dentist and some wealthier people right around the corner. And it was possible back then in the 60s, 70s, and 80s to, you know, I knew all kinds of people. I became a paper girl. And my route was similar to our mailman, Mr. Mosley. And so I delivered papers to wealthy people and teachers, and the mail carrier and I were buddies. And it felt like I knew people on every block of every street in the town.
And the identity of the town, though, was much more the town. It wasn't, you know, there was the north side, the south side, this side of the railroad tracks, that side of the railroad tracks. It wasn't that. Everyone was invested in the place itself, is the impression that I get from reading Paper Girl.
Absolutely. I mean, old man Grimes would give, the best students always got free scholarships to Ohio State. The teachers were really, really good. I could walk to my school. I could walk to the library, neither of which can you do anymore. Because they've been moved to the outskirts of town. And it was a great place to grow up. I mean, when I got to college, I felt pretty prepared. I had really good teachers. I had a second grade teacher that was just huge influence in my life. She was Black, and this was like 1973. She was teaching us about Angela Davis and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and I was able to interview her for the book, which was so cool. Because she moved away and became a principal, and I never really saw her again. But, she remembered this time when she heard somebody say the N-word, and she wrote it on the board, and she said, "Boys and girls, we're going to have a conversation about this." And at home, my dad he was racist. He didn't really like that I was learning about Martin Luther King.
Right.
And my first friends, and this is also a thing you don't think would happen in a small town. My first two friends, one I met when I was 4, she was Korean, and my second friend was Joy, she was Black.
Right.
And we're still, the three of us.
Way more integrated than the place I grew up, I can promise you.
Yes,
Everyone knew who the Messer kids were. We were like, hi.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's research now showing that poor kids do better in communities. If there are good schools, poor kids do better in more economically diverse communities, and that was certainly true of me.
But this is also a place where people came back. You went to college and then you came back. You didn't immediately pick up stakes and move anywhere but there, right? Like,
to some extent.
Okay.
The people who went to college and came back tended to be people who were like farmers' kids and coming back to run the farm or run the factory. Most people in general, my age in particular, if they went to college, unless they had a big connection, a family business, they didn't come back.
Okay. So you've got essentially a brain drain, right?
Yeah.
You're starting to see a brain drain. When did the aircraft plant close?
It's not fully closed. It
Okay.
got sold. It
All
became
right.
smaller. When my mom worked there, she soldered airplane lights when the economy was good. And when it would tank, she would pick up under the table work, babysitting or waitressing. And it sold. It began to sell in, I think it was 1977, and it's now part of the international conglomerate Honeywell.
Oh,
but it
okay.
employs maybe a third of what it
Right.
once did when it was Grimes. And there's no old man Honeywell sort of looking out
Right.
for the prospects of
So when it
Urbana's
was
kids.
When it was Grimes, when you were a kid, that's what, 1,000 plus employees,
Easily.
give or take. Okay,
Yeah.
and now we're at a third of that, so a few hundred.
Well, it's about 600 now. It was
Okay.
a third from where it was at its height
Okay.
during World War II.
Okay, and when you lose a place like Grimes, or the county seat gets smaller, and jobs start to migrate elsewhere, what are you left with?
Yeah, and we don't do very much for the people left behind, right? So I wrote about that a lot.
Oh,
in
yeah, you
Factory
did.
Man. And, we had these really limpid programs like trade adjustment assistance, but it was like they had never talked to a dislocated worker.
Right.
They would pay for you to go back to school, but you had to go full time, and nobody could imagine how would we pay our mortgage if we're in school full time. And so what I began to figure out as I started this 2-year homegoing project was that unlike when I was growing up, there were other middle class and even upper middle class people that I could see how their families worked.
Right.
And I could see how they were going to leave and go to college. They gave me something to aspire to.
Right.
And and I don't mean like that makes you better or whatever, but it just opens up so many more opportunities and gives you a chance to get out of what was for me a sometimes traumatic environment.
Right.
And just to let your brain rest, right?
You were the caboose of 4, right? Your 2 sisters and your brother are a lot older than you.
A lot.
right?
15, 13, and 9 years older.
So they're almost. One of your sisters is out of the house. The other are soon to follow her. I mean, you're essentially an only child.
Yes.
And trying to figure out. Can we talk about your siblings for a second?
Sure.
Like they've
Yeah.
gone on, they've done their things. Their experience of the world has been a little different from yours. One of your sisters did not go to college. Did Terry go to college?
No one went to college.
Oh, so
but
you're
me. Yeah.
okay. So you're the
Yeah.
you're the
And I have
experiment.
to say, they came of an age before Pell Grants. They're so
Yeah,
much
yeah.
older than me. I was
Yeah.
able to go fully on federal financial aid, which is need-based. When I was filling out that FAFSA with my mom, she made $8,000 a year,
What year was that?
1982.
Okay,
when I
so
went to college.
all right, 1982, $8,000.
Got me a full Pell Grant, which then paid everything for a 4-year university. I went to Bowling Green State University, my tuition, my room and board, my books. I even had work-study jobs for pizza and beer.
Right.
So today, that would pay for roughly 30%. So a young me today wouldn't get to go, even 10 years after I graduated, because it really started to erode during the 80s and Reagan, and then Clinton continued it, and state budgets, states, legislatures defunded education. And as somebody in the book says, and who's going to complain about it? Who's going to be the voice for these poor kids? We basically took the ability to go to a 4-year college away from poor kids, and nobody raised a stink about it.
And then we didn't put anything in its place.
Right. We also sort of stepchilded vocational, which now you're starting to hear about. They would say, if you were asking some higher ed person now, they would say, well, let the community colleges take care of it. But as you can see from the story of Silas, who is the young me in the book, the promising poor kid, just giving somebody a scholarship for community college isn't going to cut it, because especially if they're rural, because he didn't have a way to get to his college, which was a whole hour away from where he lived. And I mean, we can talk more about Silas if you want, but
Yeah,
it was
we're going to come
see
back to Silas.
so many barriers and so much more trauma than I had experienced, because in between then, not just the job losses, but also the opioid crisis.
I mean, we're looking at systemic failure. This is the point I'm trying to get to. Is we're looking at systemic failure. We're looking at financial failure. We're looking at, yes, the opioid crisis. We're looking at a profound lack of public transportation. I mean, I live in a city where I can be anywhere very, very quickly because all I have to do is hop on the subway. And the idea, or, I hate buses, but whatever, I'm glad they exist. I'm a fan of the subway, though. And the idea that I couldn't get from point A to point B or be employed because I can't afford a car, I can't afford maintenance on a car, I cannot physically get, there's one young woman in Paper Girl who's talking, at some point was riding her little sister's bicycle?
A scooter with
scooter,
a little
right.
bell on it. And she was trying to get from her trailer park, which was kind of out in the country, to her job at Burger King.
Right, and it was like an hour or something, though,
Yeah.
right? It was.
And then she also got the same scholarship that Silas got. And I'm like, well, how are you going to get to Springfield? And she said, oh, I'm going to ride that bike over there. And she pointed to a rusty bike with 2 flat tires. And I was like, honey, that's going to take an hour and a half. I said, even in winter? And she said, yeah, even in winter.
And then reality kicks in, right? And you're not riding your bike an hour in the slush and the rain and the snow and the ice and everything else. But you may not also have the tools to figure out how the pieces come together, right? We meet Silas as he's trying to get his welding certificate. He has left high school and was quite successful in band, but had some other challenges. But his family situation is such that he is, in fact, raising his baby siblings. And how do you raise baby siblings when you yourself are not that far out of your teens? So we're seeing this repetition.
Yeah. I mean, he was homeless. He was part of the reason I picked him is because band kind of saved my life too, and I had this great band director. And when I went around the high school asking, for young me's to interview, his name kept coming up, and he was the drum major of the band, and I was the leader of the band, and I really liked that he also relied heavily on his band major. And but just if you would lay a map of my trauma, my bodily trauma, and Silas's bodily of trauma, I mean, my trauma would fit on his pinky. He had lost his dad to an overdose. Mom was in and out of prison. A caretaker sexually abused him. He And he was the drum major. Like, he showed up every day.
Right.
And, they really had to bend over backwards counseling him and helping him when he was staying with a friend in another county still get to school. And it was just shockingly hard. And the first week he's starting the summer term, and the starter on his car breaks. And then his mother gets in a car wreck same day, gets a concussion, can't be left alone. And Silas has to drop out the first week. And he eventually got back in, and he's actually doing really well now. But the once he got out of that home and away from the trauma, he did much better. But he still has a lot on him.
But he also lost a job because he doesn't know enough to say, I'm sick, I need to go home, just says, I'm sick, and leaves.
Yeah.
And loses because how do you learn to model behavior when you have no one to model behavior on, right? Like, we're asking kids with very limited resources to behave in a way that they would not necessarily have any way of knowing.
Yeah.
Because if you're not around, I don't know, what do we want to call average behavior? I don't want to call it normal, but average behavior, right? Like, how do you learn to be a person in the world when you're hungry, or you don't have resources, you don't have what it takes to literally be a person in the world?
Yeah, you're just scrambling to survive.
So these kids become metaphors, right? Like, I feel like all of these kids, especially in rural communities, I mean, Brian Gladstone did this great book about the working poor in Atlanta. And if you haven't, I am going to check my notes for the title so I don't get it wrong. There is no place for us. That kind of poverty is not dissimilar to the poverty that we're seeing in Urbana, but there are resources that are more readily available in an environment like Atlanta. I mean, there is public transportation. There is more of a social net, like a societal net, than there is necessarily in a place where resources are super limited. Or like Matt Desmond's Evicted, which won the Pulitzer Prize, or he had a follow-up called Poverty by America, which is sort of Matt trying to explain how everything went off the rails as if he were sitting next to you at lunch. Highly recommended if you haven't read it. And also for people in your orbit who need sort of like a super 101 kind of understanding of how we got here, really helpful. Mm-hmm. But I meet a kid like Silas in Paper Girl, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, who's showing up for Silas?
Mm-hmm. I shared a stage with him Sunday. I did a hometown event in Urbana. Yes, 2 days before the book was out, so nobody had a chance to read it yet. Yeah. And at the end, I asked him, I said, Silas, what makes you so resilient? Because so many people would have just given up. And he said, I don't know why, but I learned how to ask for help. And that was another thing we shared. Yeah. Like, I had these friends whose moms looked out for me, particularly moms. I had Helen Wellman made me lunch every single day of high school. We would rotate between egg salad, tuna salad, what's the other salad? Chicken salad. And she too had grown up with an alcoholic father, and she could tell when I needed a hug. And my friend Joy would take me to school every day, and her parents were teachers, and, I wanted to be like them.
Right. The community was the safety net.
Totally.
It wasn't just, yes, your grandmother kept a roof over your house, but there is this communal thread running through Paper Girl that I think does unfortunately belong to this moment in the 60s and 70s and 80s, where it's not just that we blew up a larger social safety net, but also that we have become, and I keep saying we very deliberately, right? Like, there's this idea that somehow humanity shifts dramatically. Like, we're still
people.
Yeah. And I just, when I see, like, there are many different ways to sort of take the humanity out of a community and the way you describe them and everything else. And it's like, well, how do we get to a point where we remember that there are people making decisions, and they may not make great decisions. Like, we see this throughout Dopesick. We see this throughout Raising Lazarus. Certainly Factory Man to a certain extent, but I mean, we know harm reduction works, right? Like, we know harm reduction works, and yet there's this morality that gets ascribed to it where it's just like, well, we can't have that because it's gross, it's dirty, you're morally bankrupt if you have an addiction problem. And it's like, well, what if we take that out, right, and look at the systemic piece of it? And I feel like so much of what I read in Paper Girl is us looking at systemic issues that are reflected back at us through people. I mean, these are people you have known. You knew them in high school. There's an old boyfriend. There are people you grew up from childhood. Also people you're related to. But you are in the middle of this massive shift in culture, in society, in the people you know. And it kind of really hits you as your mother is ailing in, what, 2020?
Well, it starts about 2015. She
Oh,
gets
2015,
diagnosed
okay.
with dementia, so I started going home more to see her. And, and then during Trump's first term, my brother unfriended me on Facebook because of, quote, all the liberal shit you post, and which were fact-checked articles from the New York Times and the Washington Post, some of which I had written myself. And that really hurt. I mean, he stopped coming to see my kid in plays. And my brother-in-law, when I would ask him, just, chatting, how you doing, John? He'd go, deplorable. And, kind of wanting to pick a fight. And then the pinnacle moment really was at Mom's deathbed in 2020. It was the Saturday after the 2020 election when they were recounting the votes in Georgia. And the hospice nurse's phone blings, and she goes, they're calling it for Biden. And my evangelical sister, who had previously not expressed political views, I mean, I kind of knew we were probably on different sides, she just erupted with, you wait, it's fraudulent, he won't win. And that was really the question that was like, when Mom goes, what's going to be left of my family?
Right.
Because it had changed so much. And what had changed, I mean, trust in institutions had changed a lot. And I would say trust in the media had just plummeted. The media itself had shrunk to, like, the paper I delivered, the Urbana Daily Citizen. Later I wrote for it as a college intern. Had gone from having like 8 reporters to 1.5, and no longer even covers city council. I mean, so where do people get their news? Well, they go to these national, they go down these rabbit holes. And suddenly I'm seeing things like my class reunion erupts and almost falls off the rails, and there's a death threat because somebody calls somebody a white supremacist on Facebook, and the person organizing it is now QAnon. And I mean, this was a shock to me because we all live in these bubbles. I live in Southwest Virginia, but I live in a blue bubble in a city of 250,000. Somebody from the New Yorker asked me once, right after I said I live in a community of roughly 250,000. He goes, well, can you see houses next door to your house? I'm like, I can practically touch houses next to my house. So we don't understand each other, and then we're so comfortable in our bubbles. And then I start going back more, and I see Confederate flags in a town that was just a haven on the Underground Railroad, and we were so proud of that.
Right.
Not that there wasn't racism too, because there was, but Confederate flags, we were the Union. There's a Union soldier in the middle of our town square. So that was new to me too. And then as I started just studying about the Fairness Doctrine, going away under Reagan, and the Communications Decency Act, which, there was so much excitement about tech, and we didn't regulate it so that lies can be shared and Facebook doesn't have to be accountable for it. Meanwhile, they're cha-ching for, all in the cause of selling us more shit.
And you've been a reporter for decades, and so part of me is thinking, well, of course you know how to do this. You know how to dig in and ask the questions and talk to the people and get everyone to do the thing, and sit down and write the stories and get the words out in a way that makes the story very accessible. And yet, this is so personal.
Yeah.
This is so personal. This is probably the most personal thing you've ever done, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you step out? How do you do both? How do you maintain Beth Macy human being and Beth Macy journalist? Because it is two separate sets of muscles.
Yeah. So I would go home. So it's been 2 years. I would go home to Urbana for 1 week a month for 2 years, and I would just like interview. Sometimes I would interview like 8 people a day, and I would always do ride-alongs with the cops and the truancy officer and spend time in the schools, and I would see Silas and all these things, and I would pack the days. And then about maybe a year into it, it just like hit me. It was so sad.
Right.
And I was like, damn, I'm leaving on day 4 because I got to get home to my husband and my dog and my little bubble that loves me. And it was just painful. And the conversations with my siblings were, I made great strides with some of them. And with one of my sister, who was at the deathbed, not so much, although we still talk.
Right.
She came to my event in Urbana on Sunday. And, part of it is just like showing up.
Right.
Because honestly, had I not been working on this book, I'm not sure I would have spent that much time in Urbana.
Right.
And I wouldn't have gotten to know my brother again, who now shows up for my non-binary child's band, will drive 8 hours for an album release. And will text me at night like, hey, I'm at my campsite. I'm a little buzzed. I've had a few beers, but I'm jamming Restless by Palmyra. Love you. Like we came from that just by showing up for each other. And at one point, he came to visit us. We have this little cabin on a creek up in the mountains. My brother loves to fish. And I didn't know how to do any of this. I had to call experts and say, how do you have conversations across the divide? And one of the things they said was, if it's your relative, leave politics out of it. Just learn who you are as people again. So Tim wanted to see the cabin. He can fix anything. We wanted him to come and fix some stuff. And we went fishing, and he brought all the fishing tackle, and he reminded me how to fish, which I hadn't done in years. And at one point, he leans over, and he goes, so tell me about, he called him Will. His name is Sasha now, my musician child. He said, tell me about Will. Does he still date girls? And I said, they are dating a young woman now, yes. And I sometimes mess up the pronouns too. Which I was trying to mirror back, like, you didn't quite get it right, but also I get it because I mess it up too. But also I was mirroring back his tone because he was curious and he was empathetic. And then after that, he starts coming to these concerts, and it's amazing to me. And then I just think we need to remember to extend grace to folks who don't know non-binary people. And it's like gay marriage, which people were so against for so many years. And then that flips because we actually know gay people now, and we know they're great. They're just like you and me, right? But I don't think the Overton window is shifting fast enough, and I really worry about our trans friends.
I worry about everything all the time, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I think I want to come back to something that I was sort of poking at a second ago, which is this idea that people aren't metaphors, right? And like we've taken this idea that like the person sitting next to you is somehow representative of all of the things all of the time. And I mean, education is the thing that changed your trajectory. I mean, college changed your entire life. You ended up being a reporter. Maybe you were going to end up at the Daily Paper without a college education, but I don't really see that happening having read the book.
No, I wouldn't. Even at community college, I needed to get out of that town. and move somewhere else. It was very hard.
Right.
It was very scary. I
Right.
can remember my stomach grumbling and like this close to asking my mom to turn around and take
Right.
me home.
So fear, anxiety, loneliness, all of these things that we're not really having conversations about, right? Like there's this idea, and okay, I carry 2 cell phones. I live on the internet. I am not a Luddite. I live on the internet. I spend a lot of time doing things in cyberspace. But part of me wonders if we haven't somehow told ourselves a fairy tale, that we are somehow connected to these communities, right, of people that we have never met in our lives. And in some ways it's great, right? Like you're that person who's completely isolated just by geography or bad luck or whatever, and you found a community, and that's great. But somehow that has become more of a substitute for what we are doing right now here, sitting in community, right, in the middle of a bookstore on the Upper West Side, trying to sort of sort through what the world
What's going
looks
on?
like
Yeah.
by using stories. I mean, this is why I read, right? I am not the only person in the space who reads to understand something that's bigger than me. And I really love it when I find sort of an idea or a truth or something that I relate to that has literally nothing. I mean, honestly, when I saw the photo originally, when Beth's book was first announced, and I just started to laugh because you and I had the same haircut. Like, we had the same haircut. No, we really did. It was like 5 years apart, but we had the same haircut.
Did your mom cut it too?
Oh, yes, she did.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes, she did.
Always crooked bangs right before picture day.
And I am not meant for bangs, so I'm very happy that my era of that is over. But the idea that you and I could be thousands of miles away, you know, stuffed into pinafores, like, can we just stop shoving all of the tiny girl children into pinafores? Some of us are not built for pinafores. And that books are ultimately the thing that's how you and I met, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's literally, we met because Beth started writing books, and I didn't know her byline until the book thing. But my world got bigger, and I had a pretty nice educational background, and I got to do a lot of really great things and whatnot. But like, I still need all of the pieces. I need all of the mix, right? And I'm not the only person who needs all of the mix. And I'm always kind of fascinated by these communities that get really insular. And I would describe Urbana as being wildly insular now. Mm-hmm. And I don't think the people who live there would agree with me.
No, they don't know what they don't know, like
Yeah.
all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And there's somebody near the end of the book that says Urbana is the country club and the ghetto, and neither knows anything about the other.
Right.
So the big fear going into, like, at my hometown, and maybe why I had the event before they had had a chance to read the book, was it's going to be hard for them to learn about what's happening in the town and the health of it. Mm-hmm. They don't know. The newspaper hasn't told them, because they have almost no one on staff, that they have had an explosion in mental health emergency calls. It's gone up by a factor of 9 since I left 40 years
Right.
ago. Or that ER calls that go up every year by 3 to 5%, or that the graduation rate has gone down 12%. Just in the past decade.
Right.
And some of them know, because a lot of them pulled their kids out of Urbana schools and sent them to other, quote, better schools, more
Right.
rural schools in the district. But that money went with those students, and then that ends up hurting the other school students that are left behind. And then there's this huge homeschool movement, which is fine. It's the fastest growing education movement in the country, but the same parents who are maybe still suffering from addiction and other woes and those mental health calls that I mentioned are also the ones not getting their kids up for school in the morning, and they're claiming to homeschool when they're really not.
Right.
And so that's an unintended consequence of the deregulation in Ohio of homeschooling. Now, if you're going to homeschool, you have to fill out a one-page form. And the truancy officer said, yes, somebody gave me one on a Post-it note, not even doing the one page. And there are sovereign citizens, which is this movement kind of to the right of QAnon, where they won't pay taxes, they won't fill out that form. And, you know, when we arrived at that house, there was a camera and a bullseye, and inside the bullseye it said, if you can read this, you are in range. I mean, that was, So that was something. That was a day. And I just thought, man, when did being the truancy officer become a full contact sport?
Right. But we're sitting in this moment where expertise is not valued. And I'm not saying that there hasn't been gatekeeping in the past. Like, I am a person in the world. We can always improve how we've been doing things. And I'm not saying that there hasn't been gatekeeping to the detriment of communities around the country. But infrastructure works best when it feels invisible, right? And you kind of don't notice that it's happening. It's like your kids are getting educated, the roads get plowed, the garbage gets picked up. The infamous 1977 garbageman strike here in New York, that was deeply unpleasant. But what I find fascinating when I sit with this community that I've never been to, right? I mean, I have only read about Urbana. It doesn't seem that they're benefiting from some of the choices they've made, and I don't know how to even begin to help.
Yeah. There's, and the few things that really are doing evidence-based, I mean, there's some great teachers there.
Right.
There's a youth center, which is located in the library I used to walk to, that my parents went to all the time, and it's run by this gentleman, Justin Weller, and he ran against the power structure to become mayor a few years back, and a longtime mayor. I think he's on his fourth or fifth term now.
Right.
And the mayor lost. The mayor won. The mayor beat Justin for 119 votes. So, and then he took it out on Justin, and the youth center, which helps so many kids who drop out,
Right.
which is an increasing number of students, and helps kids from dropping out, helps them access food and other social supports, gets no
Right.
public funding now
Right.
because Justin took the power structure on. And also, Justin is married to his husband. And you can say that shouldn't matter, but it does.
Is it just the death of the middle class that gets us here? I mean, people used to be able to raise families, like being a toll taker on, the Triborough Bridge or the Verrazano or whatnot. You could raise a family and own your home and have a car and go on vacation twice a year. Like, you could afford your life. And is this all a consequence of a lost middle class, or is it just everything at once?
I mean, I would go with the latter
Yeah.
on that. But,
Yeah.
globalization did small communities like Urbana no favors at all.
Yeah.
And most of us that don't live in a small town don't even see the aftermath
Right.
of that. We know those counties went by and large for Trump in both elections. And we also know that similarly, the counties that don't have a source of local news also
Right.
also have lower education rates and went, 3 out of 4 for Trump in the case of Urbana.
Right.
And so it's all of that, but it's just this lack of shared narrative.
How do we bring back a genuine shared narrative, though? I'm not saying we all have to agree, but there should be some baseline connection. I mean, I'm just going to use Boston as an example, but when I was a kid, like, some families got the Boston Globe and some families got the Boston Herald. Some families got the New York Times and some got the Wall Street Journal. But, like, everyone took a paper.
Yeah.
Right, like everyone took a paper, and maybe it's like New York, right? Like, there are points of view that come with every newspaper, but everyone took a paper, and everyone, even if you were an adolescent, I mean, we were expected to have opinions about things that happened in the world because we were expected to read the newspaper as tiny people, and so obviously that has been replaced in many different ways. But, like, how do we find a shared narrative that obviously gives us space to disagree, but we're just not near that?
No, we're not near it. I mean, I think we need to support local news where we have it. In Roanoke, where I spent most of my reporting career, 25 years as a reporter for the Roanoke Times, when I moved there in 1989, there were more than 60 reporters. The newsroom had 125 people. Now they have 6 reporters. 6.
Right.
You think less? Yeah, Mike used to work there too.
Right.
Dan Casey just said it was 6. I saw him the other day. But and we don't know what we don't know. Again, there are 2 startups, online startups. They do a great job, but if you have to read all 3 of them, and you can only then you get about a third of what you once got. This is a paper that was a Pulitzer finalist. I mean, my God, Mike wrote so many award-winning stories. My friend Mike Hudson over here writes or edits for The Guardian now, and it just isn't there.
Right. But also the tiny papers were how you got to the bigger papers, right? Like tiny papers could win Pulitzers for really serious investigative journalism. And then those reporters would go on and go to like the secondary markets, and then they'd end up at a bigger paper. And so there's a little more life experience that comes with that kind of let's chase down,
But even the New York Times was too strapped or whatever. They didn't even pick up on the story of George Santos, which a local paper had broken, and they missed it or didn't have time to get to it, and so then he gets elected.
We need the little papers.
We need the
little papers with, I mean, there's this kind of waspy joke from Boston. You show up in the papers 3 times in your life: birth, marriage, and death. And yeah, that's fine, but we need all of the interstitial stuff that goes around it, right?
Yeah.
Who's doing what where, and how is that happening, and why did that decision get made to put the dump there?
And also the good stories. I talk about a young woman. I followed her story for about 5 years, and she wasn't just. I love stories about people who are the first in their family to go to college, because I just always think that's a great narrative. There's always a really good story there. And so this was a young woman. I met her. She was a library page in a predominantly historically black library, going back to segregation days. And I always did a lot of research at that library. And the librarian said to me, you're going to want to know this young woman. She was a sophomore at the time, because she's the number 1 in her class. And so I followed her. I would check in. I would get my books delivered to that library lo and behold, she's a senior. She's working behind the desk at the Gainsborough Library on the first day of April, and she's already gotten into everything she's applied to, and then she finds out she got a full ride to Harvard. I mean, she's the first person in her neighborhood to go to college, and she's going to Harvard. And I'm going to get goosebumps just telling about it now. And she now runs a library and owns a house around the corner from me. And so when the first story I wrote about her, which was called headline Library's Child Ran, a white gay hairdresser started a fund so that when she was up in Cambridge, Mass, she would have money for Pizza and Bear too, and that was awesome. And then I followed her story for several years, but there's not empathy building stories out there in maybe occasionally in the New York Times or the Post, but not even that much. There's so much news going on right now that we also need the good news, like the Selena stories.
How do we get curious again? I mean, I feel like that is a piece of the problem, is that we're not curious anymore.
Yeah, we're on our phones too damn much.
That seems like only one piece of it, though.
It is one piece of it, but it's a big piece of it. Did you get that update from your iPhone every Sunday telling you how many hours a day you spend on your phone? Oh my God, I'm not even telling you.
I have 670 stores that all have social media accounts, so we don't talk about that report on my phone ever. But I will say, I mean, yeah, I could spend a lot more time than I actually do. I find fluffy marmot videos very helpful. Highly recommend if you need fluffy animal video. Marmots are weird little creatures. Highly recommend.
Can I read one little thing?
Of course you can.
There's this part in the book where I'm covering the county fair that was a big part of my growing up, and it's been going on since 1852. And the year I go, which was not last year, but the year before, my editor meets me down there and loves the county fair. And we're walking around, and all of a sudden there's this big brouhaha because somebody had been arrested for open carrying at the fair, and the Ohio gun owners got really into it. And so the day we were there, they show up open carrying. It was a police officer from an adjoining county, and they literally took him to jail. And so Ohio gun owner shows up. The head of it's wearing a T-shirt that says ATF is gay, and he's carrying like this big rifle around, like by the toss games and the tilt-a-whirl. And he wants to get arrested so he can file a lawsuit. And he does, and he actually wins. You can now open carry at the fair. But so I started following him on Facebook, and he's it's in the lead up to the 24 election. And he's saying things like, train daily, eat red meat, ammo up for the M times, repeat. I mean, that's his meme. That's like, and everybody's like, yeah, fuck yeah, we're gonna do that. And so at the end, I'm like, the election happens. How am I going to end this book? How's it still going to be relevant a year later? And I decided to do my own take on Eat Red Meat, Train for the End Times. Where did it go? Which is how I think we get out of these.
Yep.
I say, with a nod to the Ohio gun owners, may I suggest that we instead touch grass, take a walk with a friend, buy diapers for a nonprofit dedicated to serving low-wage moms. I mean, how is that political? Babies need diapers. Help mutual aid groups led by people in struggle. Where it is safe to do so, I really think it's important that we're not just putting our most discriminated against people out there on the edge of this, but where it is safe to do so, try to mend frayed connections by practicing grace. In the words of Barbara Kingsolver, love stays alive if you tend it like a flame. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at with my brother. Support local news, run for local office, and or support candidates who are trying to change things for the better for the most people. Repeat. Okay, mine was a little longer than the ATF is gay guy, but I really think those are how we have to do it. After the election, we had an expert on authoritarianism come down to Roanoke. This friend of mine started this group called Do Good Virginia, which was about how to help local groups that are being harmed by the policies that are coming down. And one of the first things she said was, there are things we can do, but we have to begin to work weekly activism, weekly things like packing Narcan kits on Mondays, showing up at the rallies. We have to start to work those things into our weekly habits. And I really took that to heart, and it's been incredible. But because it is just so easy to stay there and be on your phone and be mad at your relative who is posting memes that you don't agree with.
So this is where I quote you for another piece. We did not coordinate the reading part. How do we still love each other beyond what we can't understand or agree with? I mean, that's part of what you just read, but I mean, love is not some squishy thing you roll around in. I mean, love actually takes thought and consideration and action. It's not like a squishy thing that you sort of keep off in the corner.
Yeah. Well, it takes like extending grace, I think. Like my brother had never known a non-binary person.
Right.
Like I hadn't known a non-binary person for many, many years either. And I was at this bridge building conference in Chicago a couple years ago, and I was interviewing this rapper named Rhymefest, who was talking about he's now he was elected school board in Chicago. He's an activist too.
Yeah.
And he was talking about he's black, he has these buddies who are rural Wyoming, and he said and he visits them a couple times a year, and he said there are many, many times during my visits where I have to learn to extend grace. I have to just be quiet because they think Chicago is just overrun with gangs. Like they won't come and see me.
Right.
But like I have to extend them grace and I have to not take it so personally because they don't know,
Right.
they don't know. And so I think I think that's one place to start. And I think we just have to listen and have conversations. We have to start with our families who, I mean, it might be easier to talk to somebody else's cousin than it is your own, but we have a duty as citizens who want the country to be a healthy place to live in to start to have these tough conversations. And I did it, and I lived, and my siblings and I are mostly still talking to each other. A little bit of a...
Feels like a win.
Feels like a little bit of a win. A little bit.
Okay. And it feels like a really good high note to end on. So thank you, Beth Macy. Give us a second to set up the book signing piece of everything.
Thank you for listening. Poured Over is a Barnes & Noble production. To help other readers find us, please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.